Shame is one of the heaviest emotions the human mind can carry, yet it often remains invisible to others. It does not shout. It whispers, slowly shaping how you see yourself. Psychologically, shame attacks identity, not just actions. It convinces you that something is wrong with who you are, not just what you did. This distinction makes it deeply powerful and difficult to escape. You may appear normal on the outside, but internally you carry a constant sense of inadequacy. Shame builds quietly, layer by layer, through experiences, criticism, and unmet expectations. Over time, it becomes a silent companion, influencing your decisions, relationships, and self-perception. You begin to hide parts of yourself, fearing exposure. And in that hiding, shame grows stronger, feeding on secrecy and silence. Understanding shame begins with distinguishing it from guilt. Guilt says you did something wrong, while shame says you are something wrong. Psychologically, guilt can motivate change, but shame often leads to withdrawal. When you feel guilty, you may try to fix a mistake or make amends. But when you feel shame, you feel unworthy of repair. This creates a sense of hopelessness. You may avoid facing your actions, not because you do not care, but because you feel fundamentally flawed. Shame attacks your identity at its core, making growth feel impossible. It creates a narrative where mistakes define you permanently. This is why shame is so deeply rooted in the mind. It does not just influence behavior, it reshapes self-perception, making it harder to separate who you are from what you have experienced or done. Shame does not appear suddenly. It is often learned over time. Early experiences play a major role in shaping how shame develops. Psychologically, repeated criticism, rejection, or emotional neglect can plant the seeds of shame. When a child is made to feel inadequate, unworthy, or not enough, those feelings can become internalized. Even subtle messages, like being compared to others or having emotions dismissed, can contribute to this process. Over time, these experiences form a belief system about self-worth. The mind begins to accept these messages as truth, even when they are not. Shame becomes part of identity rather than a temporary feeling. This is why it can persist into adulthood, influencing thoughts and behavior long after the original experiences have passed. The past continues to echo within the present, shaping how you see yourself. Shame often speaks through an internal voice that feels personal but is deeply conditioned. This voice criticizes, judges, and constantly reminds you of your perceived flaws. Psychologically, it becomes part of your thinking pattern, making it difficult to separate from your own thoughts. You may hear it in moments of failure, rejection, or vulnerability. It tells you that you are not enough, that you are unworthy, that you will never measure up. Over time, this voice becomes automatic, influencing your self-image without conscious awareness. It can hold you back from opportunities, relationships, and self-expression. The more you listen to it, the stronger it becomes. And because it feels internal, it is often accepted as truth. Challenging this voice requires awareness, because it is not your identity. It is a learned pattern that has been repeated for too long. One of the most powerful effects of shame is the urge to hide. When you feel ashamed, you do not want to be seen, understood, or exposed. Psychologically, this creates a pattern of withdrawal. You may avoid social situations, suppress your thoughts, or distance yourself from others. This is because shame thrives on secrecy. The more you hide, the more it grows. You begin to believe that if people truly knew you, they would reject you. This fear creates isolation, even when you are surrounded by others. Relationships become difficult because you are not fully present. You show only the parts of yourself that feel acceptable. Over time, this isolation deepens the sense of shame, creating a cycle that is hard to break. You hide because you feel ashamed, and you feel more ashamed because you hide. Shame creates a constant fear of being exposed, as if there is a hidden truth about you that must never be revealed. Psychologically, this fear keeps your mind in a state of alertness, always scanning for situations where your flaws might be seen. You may overthink conversations, worry about how you are perceived, or replay moments repeatedly in your head. This fear is not based on reality alone. It is driven by internal belief. You assume that if others truly see you, they will judge or reject you. This creates emotional tension in everyday interactions. You become careful, guarded, and controlled in how you present yourself. Over time, this fear limits your ability to connect deeply with others, because vulnerability feels dangerous rather than safe. Shame often fuels perfectionism, creating a constant pressure to appear flawless. Psychologically, perfectionism becomes a defense mechanism against feeling inadequate. If you can do everything right, look a certain way, or meet every expectation, you believe you can avoid shame. But this pursuit is endless. No matter how much you achieve, it never feels enough. The mind keeps raising the standard, making perfection impossible to reach. This creates exhaustion and frustration. You begin to fear mistakes, not because they are harmful, but because they threaten your sense of worth. Perfectionism traps you in a cycle where success brings temporary relief, but failure reinforces shame. Instead of feeling confident, you feel constantly evaluated, as if your value depends on performance. Shame deeply affects how you connect with others. Psychologically, it creates barriers that prevent genuine intimacy. You may struggle to express your needs, share your feelings, or trust that others will accept you. Instead of being open, you become cautious. You fear that showing your true self will lead to rejection. This can create distance in relationships, even when closeness is possible. You may also tolerate unhealthy dynamics because you feel undeserving of better. Shame can make you accept less, stay silent, or avoid conflict. Over time, this affects the quality of your connections. Relationships become surface level or imbalanced. The fear of being seen outweighs the desire to be understood, making it difficult to experience true emotional closeness. Shame often leads to self-sabotage, where you unconsciously act in ways that reinforce your negative beliefs. Psychologically, if you believe you are not worthy, you may behave in ways that confirm that belief. You might avoid opportunities, push people away, or give up before trying. This creates a cycle where your actions produce outcomes that match your expectations. Each failure or setback then strengthens the feeling of shame. It becomes a self-fulfilling pattern. You are not lacking ability. You are limited by belief. This cycle is difficult to break because it feels consistent with how you see yourself. Changing it requires not just different actions, but a different internal narrative about your worth. Shame creates a unique form of loneliness that exists even in the presence of others. Psychologically, this happens because you feel disconnected from your true self. You may be surrounded by people, yet feel unseen and misunderstood. This is not because others do not care, but because you are not fully allowing yourself to be known. You hide parts of yourself to avoid judgment, which prevents real connection. This creates emotional isolation. Over time, this loneliness deepens because you begin to believe that no one could truly understand you. The more you isolate, the stronger this belief becomes. Breaking this pattern requires vulnerability, but shame makes vulnerability feel unsafe. And so the cycle continues, keeping you emotionally distant and internally alone. Shame often drives a need for control as a way to protect against exposure. Psychologically, when you feel flawed at your core, you try to manage your environment to reduce risk. This can appear as controlling routines, rigid standards, or the need to manage how others see you. You may carefully plan interactions, monitor your image, or avoid unpredictable situations. Control creates a temporary sense of safety, but it also limits spontaneity and growth. Over time, it becomes exhausting to maintain this level of control. You are not living freely. You are constantly managing perception. This behavior is not about power. It is about protection. The mind believes that if everything is controlled, shame will not be triggered. But in reality, control only hides shame. It does not resolve it, keeping the underlying insecurity intact. Shame grows stronger when you constantly compare yourself to others. Psychologically, comparison creates a scale where you measure your worth against external standards. You look at others' success, appearance, or confidence and begin to feel inadequate. This reinforces the belief that you are not enough. Social environments and media intensify this effect by presenting idealized versions of reality. You begin to focus on what you lack rather than what you have. Each comparison adds another layer to your sense of deficiency. Over time, this pattern becomes automatic. You may not even realize how often you are evaluating yourself against others. This constant comparison keeps shame active because it never allows you to feel complete. Your worth becomes conditional, always dependent on how you measure up in relation to someone else. Shame influences your decisions in subtle but powerful ways. Psychologically, when you believe you are not good enough, you begin to avoid choices that could expose that belief. You may hesitate to take risks, pursue opportunities, or express your opinions. Fear of failure becomes fear of confirmation, confirming that your shame is true. This leads to missed opportunities and limited growth. You may choose paths that feel safe rather than meaningful, avoiding situations where you might be judged. Over time, this creates a life shaped by avoidance rather than intention. Decisions are not made based on desire, but on fear. This reinforces the cycle of shame because the lack of growth confirms your negative self-image. Breaking this pattern requires recognizing how deeply shame is influencing your choices. To manage shame, many people develop masks, carefully constructed versions of themselves that appear acceptable to others. Psychologically, masking is a defense mechanism that helps you avoid vulnerability. You present confidence, humor, or perfection while hiding insecurity beneath the surface. This allows you to function socially, but it creates a disconnect between your inner and outer self. Maintaining this mask requires constant effort, as you must monitor how you are perceived. Over time, it becomes difficult to remember who you are without it. You may feel successful externally, but empty internally. Masking protects you from judgment, but it also prevents genuine connection. People connect with the version you show, not the person you are. This deepens the sense of isolation, even when you appear socially engaged. At the core of shame are internalized beliefs that feel like undeniable truths. Psychologically, these beliefs form through repeated experiences and messages that shape how you see yourself. Statements like, "I am not enough," or "I do not deserve happiness," become embedded in your thinking. Over time, they guide your emotions, behavior, and expectations. You begin to interpret situations through this lens, reinforcing the belief repeatedly. Even positive experiences may be dismissed or minimized because they do not fit the narrative. This makes change difficult, because you are not just dealing with feelings, you are dealing with beliefs that feel factual. The burden of these beliefs shapes your reality, keeping shame active. Challenging them requires awareness and consistent effort to replace them with more balanced perspectives. Healing from shame begins with a difficult step, facing the parts of yourself you have been avoiding. Psychologically, this requires courage because it challenges the belief that these parts make you unworthy. Instead of hiding, you begin to acknowledge your thoughts, emotions, and past experiences without immediate judgment. This process can feel uncomfortable at first, because shame has taught you to avoid self-confrontation. But awareness creates space for change. You start seeing yourself with more clarity rather than distortion. The hidden self loses its power when it is brought into awareness. What once felt overwhelming begins to feel understandable. This does not remove pain instantly, but it reduces its intensity. Facing yourself is not about exposing flaws. It is about understanding them. And in that understanding, the weight of shame begins to loosen. Shame is maintained by the stories you tell yourself about who you are. Psychologically, these narratives shape your identity and influence your behavior. Rewriting them requires conscious effort to challenge automatic negative thoughts. Instead of accepting every critical thought as truth, you begin to question its origin and validity. You ask whether it reflects reality or past conditioning. This shift is powerful because it interrupts the cycle of shame reinforcement. You start replacing harsh judgments with more balanced perspectives. This does not mean ignoring mistakes. It means viewing them without attaching them to your identity. Over time, the internal narrative becomes less critical and more supportive. This change affects how you feel, how you act, and how you relate to others. The voice of shame weakens when it is no longer the only voice guiding your perception. Self-compassion is one of the most effective ways to reduce shame. Psychologically, it involves treating yourself with the same understanding and kindness you would offer someone else. Instead of responding to mistakes with harsh criticism, you respond with patience and care. This shift may feel unnatural at first, especially if you are used to self-judgment. But compassion does not mean avoiding responsibility. It means approaching it without self-rejection. When you practice self-compassion, you create a safe internal space where growth can happen. Shame loses its grip because it thrives on harshness and silence. Compassion brings openness and acceptance. Over time, this changes your emotional response to challenges. You become more resilient, not because you avoid difficulty, but because you no longer attack yourself when facing it. Breaking free from shame requires reconnecting with others in a genuine way. Psychologically, this means allowing yourself to be seen, even when it feels uncomfortable. Sharing your thoughts, emotions, or experiences with trusted people reduces the sense of isolation that shame creates. You begin to realize that your struggles are not unique or unacceptable. Others may respond with understanding rather than judgment, challenging the belief that you must hide. This creates a new emotional experience where vulnerability leads to connection instead of rejection. Over time, these interactions weaken the hold of shame. You start building relationships based on authenticity rather than performance. Reconnection does not happen instantly. It develops gradually as trust grows. But each moment of openness reduces the distance between who you are and how you present yourself. Overcoming shame does not mean it disappears completely. It means it no longer defines you. Psychologically, this is a shift from identification to awareness. You recognize shame as an emotion, not your identity. This allows you to experience it without being controlled by it. As your understanding deepens, you begin to separate your worth from your past, your mistakes, and your fears. This creates a sense of freedom that was previously hidden beneath layers of self-judgment. You become more willing to take risks, express yourself, and engage with life fully. The weight of shame becomes lighter because it is no longer carried alone or in silence. Rising beyond shame is not about perfection. It is about acceptance. And in that acceptance, you rediscover a sense of self that is no longer defined by fear, but by growth and understanding. Shame is one of the most silent, yet powerful forces shaping human behavior, often operating beneath awareness while influencing thoughts, choices, and identity. It convinces you that you are not enough, not worthy, not deserving. And over time, that belief begins to feel like truth. But shame is not truth. It is a learned perception built from past experiences, conditioning, and internalized voices. The moment you begin to question it, its grip starts to weaken. Healing does not come from hiding or perfection. It comes from understanding, acceptance, and the courage to face yourself without judgment. When you stop running from shame, you begin to reclaim your identity from it. You realize that your worth was never defined by your flaws or mistakes. And in that realization, something shifts. The weight that once held you down begins to lift, allowing you to move forward with clarity, self-respect, and a deeper sense of inner freedom.